In this video, I'm going to focus on differentiating the curriculum using the writE science sheets to help you to provide a curriculum that caters for the students that are really struggling with their literacy or their hands-on science, and students who are actually quite proficient and really need to move on further. And we know that both ends can be very frustrated, and a lot of teaching ends up being towards the middle because that's kind of realistic. But the writE science sheets are really geared up to enable a very differentiated curriculum if you use them in a way that's quite thoughtful for the students. So one of the features of the writE science sheets is that they already have in them concepts and sections that actually mirror the 6 facets of the research skill development framework that's evident on the rest of this website. So what we actually have on the teacher's page of each of the writE science sheets, the 3rd page that is not printed out for all students, but is printed out for you to choose which students you might give it to. Well, on those sheets we have the Pentagon. So it's actually 2 pentagons, one within the other, and these Pentagon have the 6 facets of the RSD. Now, what they're intended for is for those students who are actually demonstrating some proficiency in working through the standard features of the sheets, which are in effect addressing the different questions and requests that the sheets makes. But the students who are demonstrating proficiency can actually move on to using the Pentagon to locate in the first 2 pages where they have been clarifying purpose, where they have been finding information, where they have been generating data. Now, finding, for example, in the observation sheet is finding in the text, so they're actually finding information about sensors, for example. But also in the same sheet, because they're actually popping corn, but they're generating observational data. And so that is the same facet, that is quite 2 different locations, one where they'll find information, one where they generate data, but they both go into that facet. The students will also be required to ask a question that is quite evaluative, and they need to put that into the Pentagon. So that way the students are actually referring back to the things they've done. They do have all the key terms are there, at least in the early writE science sheets, so that students can say, oh, this is where I am organising. So there's 2 different locations where students are organising. And they'll pull those out and write them into the Pentagon. Now, this process is absolutely essential for students to become much more aware of what they're doing, what's their educational enterprise. The first time they're being cognitive, and they might be very clever in what they're doing, very articulate, very much using high order thinking in terms of, say, Bloom's taxonomy, using application, analysis, evaluation, synthesis. But that's cognition, that's their thinking. The move for them to use the Pentagon is where they can actually see their own thinking. Then when they're writing into the Pentagon, they're making their thinking visible. That's metacognition. So the writE science sheets of pages 1 and 2 give you that great cognition, and the Pentagon is one powerful way of enabling student metacognition. Again, that's not necessarily something to rush into. The students who are really struggling with the literacy or the hands-on or the observational components of the writE science sheets in pages 1 and 2, you don't want to rush them into that metacognition. But when there's a time, and maybe over the course of a term or even several terms, where students get used to the structure, the familiarity, the comfort, the safety, and they're feeling like engaging more in the hands-on and the literacy combined, you'll make some teaching decisions about which students are best to start to use the Pentagon first, and could they actually help other students to start to understand the Pentagon 3 or 4 weeks later when they've developed their own proficiency. Also, another consideration is when several students have completed doing a Pentagon, then they can actually look at each other's work and discuss through and say, oh, you put that there under synthesis. I thought it might belong better here under, communicate. Now the early sheets tend to be more unequivocal answers, like there's often more correct and incorrect answers. But throughout the term, things become a lot more negotiable. There's more grey areas. So, for example, should that story I wrote go more in reflection or more in communication? So these are things for students to think through, because there's often are grey areas, and the 6 facets are just artificial breakdowns into something that's educationally useful to have those separations. But in reality, there's often a lot of negotiation about where what belongs, and it's useful for students to see that process and realise that it's not absolutely black and white. This is a useful conceptual framework to provide them with this research skill development Pentagon. So I wish you all the best with the use of the writE Science resources. Thank you.